Wait. Go back. We need to start at the beginning. I love Remedy Entertainment, one of the few truly unique voices in the world of big budget gaming, one whose love of playful creativity can be felt in everything they do, smashing medium, genre, and expectation to create something identifiably theirs, sitting at the intersection of art and entertainment while not compromising on either. But this love is still relatively new for me. I hadn't played a single Remedy game until Alan Wake 2 was taking the plate, hooking me so entirely that I played through Alan Wake, American Nightmare, and Control in probably some of the best 2 weeks of my entire life, just for Alan Wake 2 to top it all, and immediately become one of my favourite games ever made in a year with some fierce competition. I was so curious about this expanding world of twisted reality and innovative gameplay, but you'll notice that I skipped Quantum Break, and I regret that decision. And now that we finally have Control resident in our sights, what better time to change that? Because Quantum Break is a Remedy game through and through, and more importantly, is sick as hell. Six years on from Alan Wake and 2 years before Control, Quantum Break totally isn't the second game in the Remedy connected universe. This is the story of Jack Joyce. At 4 AM on October the 9th, 2016, he will discover that time travel is real. He will accidentally help start the end of time, and now he has a little over 24 hours to save it with the help of his new time manipulation powers, all while facing off against his best friend who lived 17 years in the blink of an eye.
Not necessarily.
Oh, shit. What are you, some kind of goddamn X-Men?
Seeing as it was 2016, it's naturally a standard linear story-based cover shooter, or is it? You've got your standard array of weaponry from unspecified shotgun to unspecified assault rifle and unspecified SMG. Ammo is deviously limited, and the bloom is downright heretical, with the focus being on picking up dropped guns from enemies and wherever you can find them lying around. In fact, the game's entire combat philosophy is one of staying adaptable and on your toes. Cover is scattered, and enemies will not only push you out of it, but have the hand of God guiding their grenade tosses, forcing you out from the safety of this exploding car. If you want to stay alive, you have to work around your restrictions. Keep moving, pick your enemies off one by one, and don't get complacent, because that very second is when they will whip out the trademarked Power Turner Offerer. Speaking of powers, those are the only reason you aren't dead yet. Having seen firsthand why the health and safety guys feel like no one respects them, Jack has walked away with some ability to control time, at least in a localized capacity. Time Dodge is your best friend and also reminds you that these are the people that made Max Payne. Don't forget you've got a shield. It's very handy to press when the screen starts to go the color of danger. You can stop time in a small area, allowing you to stack bullets on a target before they can fight back, and you can even play out your fantasy of a DC Flash game because it is a fantasy. Shit's busted, by the way.
He's got a gun! Open fire!
These powers aren't just for combat, they also assist in exploration, giving you time to get past objects going haywire in time or just the most wonky gates I've ever seen, as well as highlighting important objects in the environment such as lore entries, which we will come back to, and the glowing thingamajigs you need to find for your upgrades. Possibly the only thing Remedy can never seem to get right is their upgrades, base abilities they have on lock, but whether it be their upgrade economy, design, or just being the only thing that doesn't seem to fit, they've never quite cracked the code on that, and Quantum Break is just another entry in that history. They aren't bad, being mostly inoffensive, but they never feel like they have much of an impact, and you could probably play the entire game without them and not notice much of a difference. Having said that, the upgrades might not be great, but the contextual cover system is very smooth. I had very few of the typical registration issues you'll have with contextual cover, and I just wanted to give them props on that one. Quantum Break's gameplay is very focused on providing a relatively short but varied experience, giving you a steady drip of new abilities and enemy types through the first 3 acts of the game, allowing the final 2 to just kind of bludgeon you upside the head for a couple hours, but we'll get to that. It does its job well, being quite reminiscent of Alan Wake's point A to B structure, while leaning toward the expanded combat arenas and more fast and loose shooter gameplay that Control would be known for. It's also a fantastic game to look at, especially during these stutters, moments where time temporarily stops with the look of a broken mirror. Many of the game's best spectacles, moments, and combat encounters happen during these stutters. Some enemies even have access to tech that allows them to move during the stutters, but when that tech is broken and they go for a never-ending nap, they will freeze in place, leaving some absolutely wild images behind. And yes, you can push them around. And with that, we've covered just about everything that makes Quantum Break a regular video game that could have quite conceivably come out in 2016. But this is a Remedy Entertainment title, goddammit, and if you thought this was a regular shooter, you've got another thing coming. Thinking back on it, I don't think I've ever played a Remedy game explicitly for its gameplay outside of maybe Alan Wake 2 because I'm a bit of a survival horror fan. Their gameplay design is solid and definitely gets better with every release, stacking up big time with Control and Alan Wake 2, but the highlight is always the worlds they create. It's what took the original Alan Wake from a kinda clunky third-person shooter to a cult classic. The unique presentation, deep world building, and the wearing of inspirations on its sleeve elevated it all and distinguished it from what made it a standard video game at the time. Remedy has some really signature aspects that follow through their games that I personally chase down with a ravenous hunger, aspects that only tend to become more central and better utilized as their library has expanded, namely the way they structure like a TV show, their phenomenal in-game copy, and of course, their utilization of live action. All of these aspects would reach new heights in Control, having been present but relatively stripped back in Alan Wake. But what I could not have fathomed was the progress made by Quantum Break, and how it arguably set the tone for Remedy as we know them now. Quantum Break is split into 5 acts in a very similar way to how Alan Wake was, emulating the nature of television where each episode would cover its own distinct arc. I love this as a pacing mechanism. There's a reason that the episode has become such a default form of media. Hell, just look at the effect it had on something like Dispatch. But it's also very helpful as someone who's allergic to putting things down in the middle of a story segment. If I'm reading a book, it's the entire chapter or nothing. I will give an episode of television or film my full attention, and if there is any doubt I'm not making it to the end, then I do not press play, which makes these newfangled games that don't have so much as a loading screen really difficult to know where I can safely stop sometimes. So thank you, Remedy, and there is a personal message of gratitude from me. But on a more editorial note, it also makes their stories a bit more interesting to watch progress than something that can't break free from the idea that everything needs to be point A to B. We can jump around and foreshadow and play with time, which is, dare I say, quite thematic for this particular title. Quantum Break's TV-esque structure also plays into the way it was written, transitioning from gameplay to more cinematic beats in an instant, and always keeping up the pace with a focus on snappy dialogues. From the interviews I've seen, it sounds like this script was gargantuan, and I can't say I'm that surprised. Another aspect of this is the way you are consistently apprised of the time and how long it has been or will be until the fracture, the official name for the big boom at the start, which helps to keep you grounded in how far you've come and how rapidly the end is approaching. Quantum Break, in my personal opinion, has to have one of the better time travel stories, especially in the way everything circles back in on itself without so much as a misstep. And that episodic structure is what allows it to so seamlessly move from putting the pieces into place to letting the dominoes fall, with that being the aforementioned head bludgeoning. But if it's the smooth pacing and structure that guides you through this narrative, then it is their copy that develops that world on a deeper level. One thing I have to bring up off the rip, Control's lore writing is one of my favourite aspects of that game, and as I mentioned when I briefly talked about it in my Alan Wake 2 review, I have never been so excited to hunt down pieces of paper. It is so brilliantly implemented with the setting and allows those who want to dive into the depths of the FBC do so, without burdening the players that just want to play through the story. And thanks to that sort of Metroidvanian nature of the Oldest House, you can spend all the time you like doing so. The implementation in Quantum Break is not quite so strong. It's mostly emails, memos, and recordings of some kind, which does keep within the theming of the game, and I actually really like that emails have the most recent message at the top, even if it is hella annoying to scroll all the way down to the bottom of a conversation or read it backwards. But the problem is it's a linear shooter, one whose narrative has, rather ironically, a lot of time pressure. We're also just this side of NPCs that yell at you when it takes you more than a microsecond to head to the objective, and they do not care if you're reading Monarch's emails or not. But this is very much a nitpick. I merely point it out as a spot of friction that seems counterintuitive in a game that has files spread out goddamn everywhere, and they're good files. Like, who doesn't like a good file? Back in Alan Wake, all you really had was the manuscript pages, which were mighty fine for the time, but they really started pumping in the details with Quantum Break. The communications especially, as well as some particularly impressive single exhibits, create a far more personal connection with a lot of these characters than can be achieved with such a limited runtime, and help to engage you with the narrative. There are a number of plot points you can see coming or understand the motives of so much better if you actually engage with the material given, even if some of them are quite extensive reads and can feel like they've brought your pace to a standstill. I feel like an addict in regression every time I start reading the lore entries in a Remedy game because they're just so Moorish, deepening the world with a naturality and a humour that you don't get often. In Quantum Break specifically, there are 3 files pertaining to some office dude's really crappy sci-fi script that he keeps sending to an actual scientist through critique, and it is lengthy. For a minute there, I forgot we were trying to save the world as I became engrossed in the world of Time Knife. I mean, how many games can you list that have that much fun with their lore writing? But Quantum Break's real claim to fame is that it's not just a game, it's also a TV show, like an actual TV show with full-on 25-minute episodes and a big enough budget for pyrotechnics. I know Remedy has a thing for live action, but this is a whole other level. The idea is that the story campaign follows the quote-unquote good guys and goes through Jack's story while the TV show explores the inner workings of Monarch, a giant tech company that your now evil best friend started up 17 years ago in a bid to prevent the end of time. They just go about it a little weirdly. I have no particular proof, but I do believe it's this aspect of the game that led to the inclusion of more traditional actors, as the earliest showcases of the game have someone else playing Jack who we will get to. The show is an insane undertaking, likely responsible for most of the heavy budget and thus why it never got a sequel when it didn't do super well. Story of Remedy's fucking life apparently, until about Alan Wake 2. But it's genuinely very good. It's a bit weird to get used to at first. It's much more character drama than the game is, but as with the story, it gets very satisfying the closer it gets to the conclusion. A number of characters have their arcs occur mostly within the confines of the show, and a handful are exclusive to it. Yet their impact on the narrative cannot be denied. When put together with the game, it becomes one complete experience, and one that I honestly think is worth experiencing for the sheer novelty of it all. But it doesn't stop there, because this is a time travel story, and one with choices at that. This is where my thoughts on the game get to touch complicated though. At the end of each story act, you play through a junction, a small gameplay segment where you play the game's villain, Paul Serene. When Jack and Paul got their powers, they also got the bundle that comes with a disease called Chronon Syndrome. But as Paul is now 17 years ahead, his condition is considerably further along. A symptom of this is losing track of the present and seeing glimpses of the future. During these segments, this manifests as being given a choice that will impact the game going forward as well as the show. With these choices, you shape how the narrative unravels to a degree, and it's generally a very cool thing to have implemented. You make your choice, get a little screen that tells you how everyone voted, and then the episode plays. You son of a... This right here is probably the biggest warning sticker I can slap on this game if you plan on playing it in the modern day. I don't know why the episodes don't work, only that they verifiably do not work. So if you want to experience the game in full, I suggest you find a full playlist with the episodes on and have it ready. You know what the real kick in the balls is? The recap for the last episode does work. It's just the episodes itself. I have to assume it's something to do with the file size, because there was an option post-launch to buy them in full. They must have been streamed initially, is my guess, and at some point that service had to go down. Either way, it's a real garbage way to find out part of your game just isn't there. And before you ask, yes, you should watch them. I have a very strange reaction to this part of the game now. By the time I ran credits, I had come to really love the inclusion of the episodes, even if I had to dip out to YouTube at the end of every bleeding chapter, as well as their characters. It all has a real guerrilla filmmaking vibe to it. But at the same time, the streaming issue is immensely inconvenient, and then there's the issue of the changes themselves. Quantum Break's story is really good, and doesn't buckle at all under time travel logic, which is arguably more impressive. They run with the whole closed loop thing, which means nothing actually changes, it's just out of order, which means it's a set story. There is no room, and I seriously doubt there's any budget, to be going crazy on multiple endings and differing narrative elements, leading to a slight sense that the choice you're making doesn't do all that much. Some of the choices you make are satisfying, but I'd argue the most interesting one is the very first one, as that at least changes one of the NPC characters you'll deal with for a good portion of the game. And brother, we will get to you, but outside that it's really nothing crazy. With one episode in particular, I actually couldn't tell you what changed, and I don't think that's a good thing. This all goes double for the little objects you can find throughout the game that quote-unquote change events. I only figured out what one of them actually did, but because I watched the episodes on YouTube and not with whatever direct choices I made, I can't tell if it just happens anyway or what.
What is that? Not sure. Just playing when we came in.
On a single playthrough, you won't really notice this. You'll enjoy making your choices and feel some sense of influence, but on a second, the whole illusion just falls apart, which is a shame. I had to counterbalance my bitching though, because again, this is all really high quality stuff that you can bet your ass no one else is doing. I would happily come back to Quantum Break one day just to experience all of this again, because I don't remember the last time I 180'd so hard from okay, this seems pretty standard to oh my god, what do you mean? It really is a worthwhile game to go through and is much better than the impression I had through word of mouth alone. It's a solid shooter with enjoyable gameplay that stays fresh, a world and story that only gets more enjoyable the further in you go, with some genuine highlights in the back end, and it's something really different, even by Remedy's standards. And if this was just a game review, that is probably where I'd stop. But I came here because someone left a bleeding door ajar and I couldn't stay away any longer. For anyone who made the same mistake I did, who is just starting their adventure into Remedy's connected universe, I implore you to leave now and do not skip Quantum Break. The only reason it isn't connected is because of the IP issues. It is still more than worth exploring. For anyone sticking around, thank you for giving me a safe space to lose my fucking mind. Do you have any idea how mad I am that the last 2 Remedy games I've played have left me with some dangling entryway-shaped plot threads? That's just, how have you managed this? I don't know where I got the idea that Quantum Break wasn't that tied into the other games. Maybe it was just that I heard they confirmed it wasn't part of the universe due to the whole Microsoft owning it thing, and I stretched that to mean it's irrelevant. Well, we've already talked about why the game is worth playing even if it wasn't connected, but boy was I sure proven wrong inside of 20 minutes. As Jack and Will are attempting to escape the university, you go through this classroom, and it's just got a chalkboard covered in Alan Wake stuff, from aspects of the original game to plot points that wouldn't become relevant until the second. I'd always convinced myself that Alan Wake 2 was a product of its long wait, and I'm sure that to some degree it is, but between this and the absolutely inexplicable video that is scarily close to the plot of Alan Wake 2, we have clear proof that even here, the sequel was at least forming in Sam Lake's beautiful mind, which only makes me more mad that I skipped Quantum Break in the first place. Oh, that chalkboard is also the first mention of Control's AWEs, which is beyond messed up to see that here, and oh my god, I've kept muttering to myself about how the AWE DLC for Control could also stand for Alan Wake expansion, and clearly I wasn't far off. This already raises a lot of questions though, because it makes no sense for someone to have this information, certainly not at a university. In any other game, I'd write it off as the writers winking at the audience, but not Remedy. Their shit is normally as close as you can get to in-universe canon. So I won't lie to you, thinking about this has been disturbing my sleep. I'm a fan of the alternate timeline theory personally, which for many obvious reasons works for this particular game, but it also really doesn't because Alan's books are scattered throughout the game. So at this point, I don't know, I'm just trying to keep my sanity in check, honestly. I do think the whole alternate timeline thing has become more appealing since Remedy split from Microsoft though, because it allows people to justify the existence of Quantum Break, and there's some really fun stuff that supports it intentionally or not. Let's start with this cheeky devil, shall we? This is Nick. He's the taxi driver whose face I couldn't place for 1 and a bit playthroughs. In my first run, I made the choice that lands you with Amy, and I would argue that story-wise, she is the stronger option, even if Nick is way more fun. Seeing the other NPC was a big part of why I did the second playthrough, so it was really putting me off when I felt like I'd seen his face somewhere before, but I couldn't place him, only to see him stand next to Beth and have a goddamn light bulb go off in my head. That's right, depending on the choices you make, you can have Dylan and Jesse Faden standing next to each other, completely fine for the first time, not trying to kill each other. Nick's actor was also seemingly the original Jack, which I find very interesting. I think I went into a fugue state seeing these two. I knew roughly that Jesse's actor was in Quantum Break, but having them both standing there sent me through a loop because I started wondering, how purposeful was that in relation to Control? Like, did they do that on purpose? To screw with me specifically? I'm relatively confident the fight to get rights back from Microsoft started happening after Control. The groundwork was likely done before or during, yet in Control, Dylan is already saying door, not hatch. Again, alternate timeline or fucking with me, you decide. Never mind all the confusion around door, hatch, whatever his name is. Door is one of the things I keep coming back to about Alan Wake 2. I just love the way that whole character was done, and I'd been told about Hatch, so I was pleasantly surprised to see how different Hatch is while still being similar where it matters. I don't agree on this idea that they're like the literal same character. I see their power set as fundamentally different, even if at a glance they are very much on the same lines. But there is something to be said about the early Door mentions and the fact that Lance Reddick was meant to portray the character in Alan Wake 2 before his tragic passing. I think it makes more sense to look at it in the same way as we look at Shawn Ashmore playing Tim Breaker. They could be implying multiverse rules, the DLC certainly did even if it wasn't meant to be taken as canon, but I think it's more that they love these actors and want to keep them involved, so they gave them a new way to be. Going one step further and referencing their previous roles is more for fan satisfaction. See most of Tim's role in Alan Wake 2 being the connective tissue between Quantum Break, Control, and Alan Wake 2. I think it's similar for Jesse and Dylan as well, though maybe there was more intention there at one point, which is what I'm still trying to figure out. This isn't even everything, by the way. This is just what's been keeping me up at night with immense regret. Considering Quantum Break is much more of a traditional sci-fi story than Remedy's usual in-house horror blend, it makes sense that it doesn't have quite so much to drive me crazy, but truthfully I went in expecting next to nothing, so I've been completely blindsided by all of this. It's a game that really was crying out for a sequel, even just to tie up loose ends, and I can only imagine how it would turn out if current Remedy gave it a shot, but it's never going to get one. In part due to Microsoft's ownership of the IP, and also because those actors have moved on to other characters and stories within the universe. That said, I'm also not convinced they won't do something big with Tim, and it's only a matter of time before Door comes back, so I nonetheless look forward to all of it. With Control Resonant coming in the next year, it was really fun to go back and explore a clearly pivotal game for the studio that I had somehow missed that first time around. And now I'm ready and raring to go, whatever crazy twists and turns they have to offer in 2026. I mean, that trailer was already pretty crazy. Did anyone else think we'd be playing Dylan? Because I sure as shit didn't.